This isn't just a story, it's a cry from the soul of nature. A wild whisper in the dark. Two newborn hearts clinging to life in silence. They were found at sunrise, not placed gently, not sheltered kindly, but discarded like forgotten things. A torn, soggy cardboard box barely holding its shape sat just outside the shelter gates. No food, no warmth. Not even a note. Only the breath of dawn stirring the air around the container. When the volunteer arrived that morning, she nearly walked past it. But something pulled at her spirit. A heaviness like the earth itself whispering of a fragile life still waiting. She knelt, not yet knowing the weight of what was inside, not yet prepared for the silent prayer sealed within. As her fingers parted the damp flaps, the breath caught in her chest. Inside, barely moving, tangled in each other like strands of the same soul, lay a Labrador puppy and a Bobcat kitten, no older than 5 weeks. No sound, no cry, only the rise and fall of two tiny chests. The pup's golden head was tucked under the kitten's chin, one soft paw draped protectively across the kitten's back. As if, even in the throes of hunger and cold, he believed his touch could keep her alive. The kitten, her fur matted with damp, did not stir. They were curled so tightly together, their bodies shivering in unison, that for a moment the volunteer couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. And there, in that box of despair, two hearts clung to life not by chance, but by an invisible bond that only love could forge. A wild animal and a domestic pup born into separate worlds, left to die together, or perhaps to save each other. No names. No collars, no footsteps to trace. Only the eerie silence of early morning and the storm of questions that would never be answered. Who left them? Why this unlikely pair? But the why faded quickly into the how. How had they survived? And how were they still holding on? The shelter staff moved fast, instinct and training taking over as towels were heated, fluids prepared, and vitals checked. But amidst the chaos of rescue, a heartbeat of awe pulsed beneath the surface. It wasn't just that they had been abandoned, it was the way they were together. They hadn't just huddled for warmth. They had fused like twin stars in a collapsing galaxy. The Labrador's front leg was swollen, clearly injured, maybe from a fall, maybe from being thrown. Every movement made him whimper, and yet he stayed still, his body wrapped around the kitten like armor. She, smaller and wilder, bore the silent wounds of frostbite on her ears and paw pads. Her breath was shallow, her fur brittle. And yet, when the vet tried to lift the puppy for a scan, the air changed. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. The moment River was moved, Sage's soul screamed. It wasn't a sound they expected from something so small, so close to death. The Bobcat kitten sprang to life, her eyes wide with panic, her tiny claws scraping frantically at the observation window. The sound that came from her wasn't a hiss or growl, it was something deeper. A cry pulled from the aching marrow of her being. It echoed off the shelter walls, jagged and raw. And it shattered everyone in the room. She wasn't wild. She wasn't even scared for herself. She was fighting for him. When River was returned, her body melted against his, her breathing slowing only when she could bury her nose into his fur again. In that moment, everyone in the room knew they weren't just bonded, they were soul-tethered. Two are better than one. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. She wasn't clinging to life, she was clinging to him. They named her Sage, for the wisdom that seemed too ancient for a creature so small. And the golden puppy? They called him River, because no matter how broken he was, his love flowed to her without end. From the start, Sage never left his side. Not for food, not for sleep, not even when her own injuries needed tending. At night, she curled around him, her tiny body wrapped protectively along his spine. When he cried from pain, she would press her nose to his and simply stay, a stillness so profound it felt like a prayer. And when the staff carried Sage to the medical bay, River would cry, not a bark, not a whimper, but a sharp, aching sound that filled the halls with something too deep for words. Only when she returned would he quiet. Only when she laid beside him could he sleep. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. She wasn't just his friend, she was his reason, his breath, his survival, even. As River began to heal, limping less and eating more, his spirit still moved only when Sage was near. And Sage, wild by nature, showed no fear of the humans tending her. Cautious, yes, but not hostile. Her focus never wavered. Her instincts, the ones meant to keep her wild and wary, seemed to hush in his presence. And then came the moment no shelter volunteer would forget. River, now strong enough to limp toward the communal feeding area, approached a shared bowl. A larger dog, meaning no harm, nudged him aside. But before anyone could intervene, Sage was there. A blur of golden fur and fire. She didn't claw, didn't bite, but she stood. Ears flat, body low. A growl rolled from her chest. Deep, ancient, maternal. Her small frame trembled, not from fear, but from purpose. Greater love hath no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend. In that growl was a declaration. He is mine. You will not harm him. The room fell silent. Even the older dog backed away, and River? He simply stepped forward, nudged his head under her chest, and began to eat. Safe, sheltered, loved. That was the moment the staff stopped seeing Sage as a bobcat and started seeing her as something more. A guardian, a sister, a soul in fur. They played like siblings, River bounding clumsily with his lopsided gait, Sage leaping over him in golden flashes. They chased shadows, stole blankets, curled into each other like vines. They were wild joy and gentle protection, a miracle in motion. And their bond grew deeper with every sunrise. And the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and a little child shall lead them. They weren't just surviving, they were transforming, together, and just before lights out, as a volunteer named April lingered in their room, she watched as Sage, always the last to sleep, circled twice and then laid down beside River, her golden body curved around him like a final promise. He was already asleep, but in that quiet moment, she pressed her head against his and sighed. The room fell still, and April whispered, "To no one and to everything, this isn't rescue, this is redemption. An animal is calling, will you answer? Because sometimes the wild teaches us how to be human." He stirred, just slightly. A sleepy breath, a stretch of his golden limbs, and then, the gentlest thing you could imagine, River lifted his head and pressed his warm nose to Sage's cheek, licking it with such delicate care, as if to say, "You're still here. Still yours." April, the volunteer who had watched over them like a quiet guardian, froze in that moment, breath caught in her throat. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she lifted her phone. Pressed record, no filters. No captions. Just a lens catching the sacred rhythm of two lives breathing in sync, nose to nose, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sage's eyes fluttered closed. River let out a long, contented sigh, and just like that, they fell asleep. As if they'd done it every night of their lives? As if the cardboard box had never happened. As if heartbreak and frostbite and loneliness had never touched their tiny bodies. That night, April posted the video, no clever hook. Just a caption that read, "We don't know how they found each other, but we know one thing, no one should ever separate them. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you." And by morning, the world had answered. Millions watched. Tens of thousands of comments flooded in like a rising tide of hope. People wrote, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," and "Their friendship has no boundaries." Others simply whispered into their keyboards, "I didn't know I needed this today." And just like that, it wasn't just a video anymore. It was a movement. Letters began to arrive at the shelter. Some handwritten in shaky cursive, others typed with emoji-filled joy. Donations came next, food, blankets, medical supplies. Then strangers started showing up. Some had driven hours. Just to ask, "Is it true? Is the Bobcat really raising the puppy?" And every time the volunteers smiled and said the same thing, "No, they're raising each other." As iron sharpens iron, so one soul sharpens another. And what happened next was something even the wild couldn't predict. Sage began to change. But not in the way most wild things do when placed among humans. She didn't retreat. She didn't hiss or vanish into the corners of her enclosure. She didn't grow harder or colder. No, Sage did the opposite. She began to open, slowly, gently. First with River, as always, her touchstone, her son. But then others noticed something else. Something remarkable. The other puppies in the shelter, the small, the shy, the injured, the orphaned, began to wander toward her, as if drawn by something they couldn't name. As if they saw in her not a predator, but a protector. And, Sage? She didn't flinch. She didn't run. She stayed still. Let them come close. Sometimes she'd nudge their heads. Sometimes she'd simply lie there, eyes half closed, a silent sentry in fur, whispering without words, "You're safe here too." The righteous are a shelter in the storm, a refuge in times of trouble. And the cameras kept rolling, not for content, but because it felt like witnessing grace. One video showed two tiny terrier pups wrestling near Sage's paws. One yelped. Sage glanced down and, without claws, without aggression, she reached out a paw, just a soft nudge. A gesture more mother than wildcat. The caption on the video read, "We've never seen a bobcat become a mentor." And the internet responded again, not with noise, with awe. But no moment stayed with the volunteers quite like the one that came late one quiet afternoon. A staff member entered the main room and froze. There was Sage, not hiding in the corners, not crouched in caution, but sprawled in the center of the floor like a queen at rest, regal, calm, three small puppies, curled against her side. One was balanced on her back. Another rested his head on her outstretched leg. And River, as ever, sat just beside her, upright, watchful, like a proud older brother guarding their den. The lion and the lamb shall lie down together. She wasn't just the wild one anymore. She was the shelter's heart. River was healing faster than anyone expected. His limp had vanished, his coat gleamed. He chased toys and stole socks and wagged his tail in great sweeping arcs of joy. He was ready for a home, a family, a name tag jangling on a collar. And Sage, she had grown too, taller, stronger. Her coat was thick and wild and beautiful. The team knew what it meant. It was time. Time to transition her into a rehabilitation enclosure. Time to prepare her for a return to the world her instincts remembered, to the wilderness. But no one expected what came next. When they tried, separating them, just for a few hours to test, River in one wing, Sage in another, it was like something in the universe cracked. Sage stopped eating. She paced. Pressed her face to the wire, eyes wide. Her tail twitched violently. When she couldn't find River's scent, she let out a sound so hollow, so broken, it chilled every spine in the room. And River? He scratched at doors, refused food, barked into the silence, searching the shadows. What God has joined together, let no man separate. Every time they were apart, it wasn't training. It was heartbreak. One of the staff members finally said what everyone else felt. It's like we're breaking something holy. Because they hadn't just survived together. They had become together. And so the answer came, not from policy, not from books, but from the quiet clarity of love. They would not be separated. A sanctuary stepped forward. Not just any place, but one with protected wild land, safe, free, and they made an offer that no one had dared dream. Sage would live there. And River would come too, not as a pet, not on a leash. As her companion, her constant, her family. Love knows no boundaries, for perfect love casts out fear. And the world held its breath, then erupted in joy. The videos continued. River and Sage walking side by side through tall grass. Sage rolling onto her back as River nudged her with playful mischief. The two resting beneath trees, breathing in rhythm. Millions watched. Thousands wept. But then something even deeper happened. The sanctuary opened its gates. They called them Encounter Days, and the people came. Not just fans, seekers, children pressed their faces to the glass. Veterans leaned on canes, cancer survivors in wheelchairs, mothers who had lost, fathers who were still searching. And in that stillness, Sage stepped forward. She didn't growl. She didn't hide. She met their eyes, held their gaze. As if saying, I see you, I know your sorrow, but there is still love. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, and always, always. River was the first to greet. If a child hesitated, he moved slow, tail low, smile wide. If an elder reached out a trembling hand, he leaned in and pressed his head into their palm, and Sage followed. Always just behind, her courage, it seemed, was tethered to him. One soul at a time, and the people, they cried. Not from sadness, from recognition. Because they weren't looking at a bobcat and a dog. They were looking at something pure, love unfiltered. Friendship unasked for but freely given. Proof that even in the darkest hours we do not have to break if someone is beside us. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Their story spread like wildfire, but not one that burned, one that healed. Classrooms shared the video. Hospitals replayed it in waiting rooms. Dinner tables lit up with conversations of kindness. Children drew pictures, held fundraisers, sold bracelets and cookies to help other animals like Sage and River. One child wrote in crayon, "They teach. You ought to be kind." And back at the shelter where it had all begun, the halls were fuller than ever. Retired teachers, teenagers, single parents, volunteers who had never touched an animal before. They came every week now, rolled up their sleeves, whispered as they lifted a shivering pup or fed a lonely kitten, "It's because of them." And somewhere, beyond the trees, in the golden hush of late afternoon, a bobcat and a dog lie side by side, breathing in sync. Just like the first time. Just like always. This isn't just a story, it's a call to every heart that's forgotten. How to feel, a bobcat, a puppy, a torn box. And a love that never let go. When visitors came to the sanctuary, they didn't come for spectacle. They didn't come to marvel at a wild bobcat who had somehow grown up beside a domestic pup. They came for something deeper, something quieter. They came to feel, to remember. To stand in the presence of a bond so pure it bypassed words and went straight to the soul. People entered the viewing area with wide eyes and tight hearts, and they left different, softer, fuller, quieter. They didn't leave talking about the bobcat's claws or the pup's golden coat. They left whispering about something else entirely. Hope. A woman in her 60s stood at the glass one afternoon, hands trembling, tears on her cheeks. She said, it softly, not to anyone in particular, but maybe to herself, if a bobcat can love a puppy, maybe we can learn to be gentler with each other too. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, and a little child will lead them. Because sometimes it takes the wild to show us the way back to what's good. 2 years have passed since the day that Box was found. Seasons have turned like pages in a quiet book, and yet some stories never age, they deepen. Sage now lives in a vast open enclosure on the edge of the sanctuary, trees rising like guardians around her, the wind whispering through the grass, freedom humming beneath her paws. She is no longer the trembling kitten with frostbitten ears. She moves now with quiet power, a queen of her own forest. Her eyes, still gold and endless, hold the memory of every soul who's ever come close. And River, strong, calm, steady, follows just behind her, a shadow made of love. They are not babies anymore. They are something more. Something sacred, something eternal. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. And yet, some things have never changed, and never will. At night, when the stars settle above them like watchful spirits, and the sanctuary falls into a sacred hush, they sleep as they always did. Pressed close, nose to fur, chest to chest. Two hearts that once beat against the edge of death now beat in rhythm with the wild and the wondrous. You can walk by their enclosure in the silence of midnight and hear nothing but the soft sound of breath that once might have stopped had it not been for the other. They sleep like that still, as if the torn box never happened. as if the cold never touched them, as if the world, for all its chaos, still had room for miracles. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. Because love like theirs doesn't fade, it roots, it grows. It becomes, we never found out who left them in that box. No name, no face, just silence and a mystery that never unraveled. We don't know where they came from, but we know why they were sent. To remind us, to pull us back from the edge of forgetting, to show us that even when life begins in cruelty or fear, it can still bloom into something radiant. Their story was never about the pain. It was always about the possibility that in a torn cardboard box, there might not just be suffering, there might be salvation. That sometimes what gets abandoned is actually what the world most needs, a second chance. A reason to believe? A bond so unlikely, so perfect that it makes us pause and remember goodness is still possible. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so some have entertained angels unawares. And sometimes angels come in fur, with claws and tails and broken beginnings. Sage and River weren't just rescued, they were revealed. Like a secret the world had forgotten, a truth buried under layers of fear, cynicism, and despair. But when their video touched your screen, it wasn't pixels, it was purpose, a reminder, a spark. And that spark has become a flame. One that lives in classrooms where children draw pictures of Sage and River with crayons and write messages like, "They showed us how to be kind." One that lives in hospitals where nurses play their videos to remind the sick that love can still find you in dark places. One that lives in the hands of every volunteer who shows up week after week whispering, "It's because of them. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And their light still burns, not from fame, but from faith. So maybe this story isn't about a bobcat and a puppy. Maybe it's about you. About what you believe when the world grows too loud. About how you see others, the broken, the wild, the unfamiliar. Maybe this is your reminder that even when you feel lost, you're still worthy of being found. Because sometimes fate leaves a box at your door. Inside it, shaking, breathing, eyes wide with fear, is a chance. A chance to become something softer, something better. Something whole. This is the story of Sage and River, of fear and rescue, of separation and reunion, of wild instinct transformed by devotion, of how love, true love, doesn't care about species or scars. It only cares about presence, about staying, about holding on when everything says to let go. Follow Jungle Diaries for more stories like this, stories that move you, that change you, that bring you back to the wild inside your own heart. And if this one touched you, share it. Because you never know who out there might need a reason to believe in something good today.